Have you ever wondered why you keep sabotaging your own success? Why do you stand in your own way when you're so close to achieving your dreams? Today we're exploring The Mountain Is You by Brianna Wiest, a transformative guide that reveals how self-sabotage is actually your greatest opportunity for growth. This book will show you that the obstacles you face aren't external, they're internal, and that means you have the power to overcome them. The mountain represents the accumulated obstacles of our unprocessed emotions, unresolved traumas, and self-sabotaging behaviors. It stands between who we are now and who we want to become. This chapter introduces the core concept that we are both the obstacle and the solution to our own problems. Self-sabotage isn't a character flaw, but a coping mechanism that once served us, but now holds us back. The journey of climbing your mountain is about confronting yourself honestly and compassionately. You cannot think your way out of problems you behaved your way into. You must take action. The mountain teaches us that growth requires discomfort and that avoiding pain only creates more suffering. Understanding that you are your own mountain is the first step toward transformation. This realization shifts you from victimhood to empowerment. The climb ahead is challenging but ultimately rewarding because it leads to the life you've always wanted. When you reach the summit, you'll discover that the person who began the journey is not the same person who completes it. What we call self-sabotage is actually self-preservation in disguise. Our subconscious mind creates these patterns to protect us from perceived threats, even when those threats are no longer real. Every behavior that seems destructive has a hidden positive intention rooted in our past experiences. For example, procrastination might protect us from the fear of failure or success. Overeating could be a way to numb emotional pain or create a physical barrier against intimacy. Understanding the underlying need behind the behavior is crucial for change. When we recognize that these patterns once served a purpose, we can approach them with compassion rather than judgment. The key is to identify what we're really afraid of and address that core fear directly. Self-sabotage often emerges when we're on the verge of a breakthrough because change feels threatening to our sense of identity. Our minds prefer the familiar discomfort over the unknown possibility of something better. To overcome these patterns, we must create new associations and beliefs about what's safe and possible for us. This requires patience and consistent effort to rewire our neural pathways. The goal isn't to eliminate these behaviors through willpower alone, but to understand and replace them with healthier coping mechanisms. Your mountain calls to you through persistent dissatisfaction, unexplained anxiety, and recurring problems in your life. These signals are your inner wisdom trying to get your attention and guide you toward necessary growth. When you feel stuck or unfulfilled, it's because you're being called to evolve beyond your current limitations. Ignoring the call doesn't make it go away. It only intensifies the discomfort until you're forced to listen. The universe has a way of making the message louder when we refuse to hear it. Your mountain might manifest as relationship problems, career stagnation, health issues, or financial struggles. These aren't random misfortunes, but specific areas where you need to develop and heal. The calling often feels uncomfortable because it requires you to leave behind old versions of yourself and familiar patterns. Many people spend years resisting the call, choosing temporary comfort over lasting transformation. However, the longer you delay, the more painful the eventual confrontation becomes. Answering the call means accepting that you're ready for more than your current circumstances offer. It requires courage to admit that you're capable of change and worthy of a better life. The mountain isn't punishing you. It's inviting you to become who you're meant to be. Starting the climb requires honest self-assessment and willingness to face uncomfortable truths about yourself. You must first acknowledge where you currently are without judgment or denial. This means taking inventory of your behaviors, patterns, relationships, and choices with brutal honesty. The ascent begins when you stop making excuses and start taking responsibility for your life. You don't need to have all the answers before you start. You just need to take the first step. Progress often comes from small, consistent actions rather than dramatic overnight transformations. Setting realistic expectations helps prevent discouragement when the journey feels difficult. You'll need to develop new skills, including emotional regulation, self-awareness, and resilience. Building a support system of people who encourage your growth is essential during this phase. You must also learn to distinguish between helpful guidance and voices that keep you stuck. The beginning is often the hardest part because you're breaking inertia and challenging long-held beliefs. Every step forward builds momentum and confidence in your ability to continue. Remember that climbing doesn't mean you won't slip or need to rest. It means you keep moving upward despite setbacks. The ascent is not linear, and accepting this reality prevents unnecessary frustration. We become attached to our pain because it's familiar and provides a strange sense of comfort and identity. Many people unconsciously recreate painful situations because they know how to navigate that suffering. This familiar pain feels safer than the unknown territory of healing and happiness. Your nervous system adapts to chronic stress and interprets peace as dangerous or boring. Breaking free requires recognizing when you're choosing familiar discomfort over unfamiliar wellness. Some people build their entire identity around their struggles, making it frightening to imagine life without those problems. The stories we tell ourselves about our pain can become more important than the actual healing. You might notice yourself sabotaging positive situations because they don't match your internal narrative of who you are. Letting go of old pain means grieving the time lost and the person you were when that pain defined you. It also means accepting that you're worthy of better experiences than what you've known. The familiar pain often masquerades as loyalty to your past self or to people who hurt you. Choosing new experiences requires conscious effort to override automatic patterns that pull you back to what's known. Healing doesn't mean the pain never happened. It means you're no longer willing to let it dictate your future. Perspective shifts everything in how we perceive our challenges and obstacles. What seems insurmountable today may look manageable from a different vantage point tomorrow. Often our mountains are magnified by our fears, assumptions, and limiting beliefs rather than actual impossibility. When you zoom out and see the bigger picture of your life, individual problems shrink in significance. Time has a way of revealing that many things we stressed about weren't as critical as they seemed. Developing emotional distance from your problems allows you to approach them more strategically and less reactively. Sometimes what feels like a crisis is actually an opportunity disguised as a challenge. The size of your mountain is often proportional to your current capacity. As you grow, previously difficult things become easier. Comparing your current self to who you were 5 years ago shows how much you've already overcome. Many mountains become molehills simply through consistent effort and patience rather than dramatic intervention. Learning to regulate your emotional responses prevents minor setbacks from feeling like major catastrophes. Your perception is shaped by your state of mind, so managing your mental health directly impacts how you experience difficulties. When you realize you've overcome mountains before, new challenges feel less threatening and more like familiar terrain. Every single day offers opportunities to practice becoming the person you want to be. Your life isn't waiting to begin after you fix yourself. It's happening now, and now is when the work must occur. The mundane moments are where real transformation happens, not in dramatic epiphanies or perfect conditions. How you handle small frustrations reveals and shapes your character more than how you handle major events. Practice means showing up consistently even when you don't feel motivated or inspired. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be committed to the process of improvement. Each choice you make is either moving you toward your goals or away from them, regardless of how insignificant it seems. The quality of your daily habits determines the quality of your life more than occasional bursts of effort. Mindfulness turns ordinary activities into opportunities for growth and self-awareness. When you treat life as practice, failure becomes feedback rather than a final verdict on your worth. You learn to embrace imperfection as part of the learning process rather than evidence of inadequacy. Practice requires patience because visible results often lag behind consistent effort. The person who shows up daily with dedication will always outpace the person waiting for ideal circumstances. There comes a moment in every transformation where you must make a definitive choice about your future direction. The pivot point is that instant when staying the same becomes more painful than the fear of change. You recognize that you cannot continue living the way you have been without serious consequences. This moment often arrives after hitting rock bottom or experiencing a wake-up call that forces clarity. At the pivot point, excuses no longer satisfy you and distractions no longer numb the discontent. You see with sudden sharpness that your current path leads somewhere you don't want to go. The pivot requires decisive action, not just wishful thinking or vague intentions to change someday. It's the difference between wanting to change and committing to change regardless of difficulty. Many people experience multiple pivot points throughout their lives as they evolve and face new challenges. The courage to pivot comes from valuing your future more than your comfort in the present. Once you pivot, there's no going back to who you were. You've seen too much and know too much about yourself. The pivot point is both terrifying and liberating because it marks the end of one chapter and the uncertain beginning of another. Those who seize this moment find that momentum builds quickly once they've made the commitment to transform. Real transformation requires consistent, often unglamorous effort over extended periods of time. The work involves confronting your shadow self, healing old wounds, and rebuilding your belief systems from the ground up. It means sitting with uncomfortable emotions instead of running from them through distractions or addictions. You must examine the stories you've been telling yourself and question whether they're actually true. The work includes setting boundaries, even when it disappoints people who benefited from your previous lack of them. It requires developing self-discipline to choose long-term fulfillment over short-term gratification repeatedly. You'll need to cultivate self-compassion because the journey involves mistakes, setbacks, and moments of doubt. The work is internal before it becomes external. Changing your life starts with changing your mind. This process often feels lonely because it's deeply personal and cannot be outsourced to others. You must learn to validate yourself instead of seeking constant external approval and reassurance. The work involves building new neural pathways through repetition until healthier patterns become automatic. It requires honesty about your role in creating the circumstances you want to escape. There is no shortcut or life hack that replaces the necessity of doing this deep inner work consistently. While you cannot control what happens to you, you are completely responsible for how you respond to it. Taking responsibility for your responses is liberating because it means you're not a victim of circumstances. Your emotional reactions are not facts. They're interpretations that you can learn to manage and modify. Blaming others or external events keeps you powerless and stuck in the same patterns indefinitely. Responsibility means acknowledging that you choose your attitude, your focus, and your actions in every situation. Even when others treat you poorly, you decide whether to internalize their behavior or maintain your boundaries. This doesn't mean toxic positivity or pretending everything is fine when it isn't. It means developing the maturity to separate what happened from the meaning you assign to it. You can acknowledge pain while refusing to let it define your identity or dictate your future. Taking responsibility for your responses requires self-awareness and the ability to pause before reacting. It means developing emotional intelligence to recognize when you're being triggered by old wounds rather than present reality. You become the author of your life story instead of a passive character affected by random events. When you own your responses, you reclaim your power and open possibilities that didn't exist when you saw yourself as powerless. Creating a new life requires not just removing what doesn't serve you, but actively building what does. You must design your environment, relationships, and routines to support the person you're becoming rather than who you were. This involves making conscious choices about how you spend your time, energy, and attention daily. Building means establishing new habits that align with your values and long-term vision for yourself. You need to surround yourself with people who reflect the qualities you want to develop in yourself. Your physical space should inspire and support your goals rather than trigger old patterns or remind you of past failures. Building requires investing in your growth through education, therapy, mentorship, or whatever resources serve your development. You must learn to say no to opportunities and relationships that pull you backward, even when they're tempting or comfortable. The new life won't look like your old one, and that's exactly the point of the transformation. You'll need to develop new skills, interests, and ways of thinking that match your evolved identity. Building is gradual and requires patience as you construct the foundation before visible structures appear. Celebrate small wins and progress markers to maintain motivation during the construction phase. Remember that you're not just fixing what's broken. You're creating something entirely new and better than before. The life you're meant to live isn't a destination, but an ongoing expression of your authentic self. It emerges when you align your daily actions with your deepest values and truest desires. This life doesn't require perfection. It requires presence, honesty, and willingness to keep growing. You'll know you're living it when your external circumstances match your internal sense of purpose and peace. The meant-for-you life often looks different from what you originally imagined because you've evolved beyond old limiting dreams. It includes both joy and challenge because growth never stops and new mountains will always appear. Living authentically means making choices based on who you are rather than who others expect you to be. You stop comparing your journey to others because you understand that each path is unique and incomparable. The life you're meant to live feels like coming home to yourself after years of wandering in unfamiliar territory. It requires ongoing maintenance, attention, and adjustment as you continue to evolve and circumstances change. This life isn't static or permanent. It's dynamic and responsive to your continued growth and learning. When you're living it, you experience deep fulfillment even during difficult times because you're being true to yourself. The mountain you climbed becomes the foundation for the life you now stand upon, forever changed by the journey.